show about to strike. Fans are roaring, feel the cheer. New York, the atmosphere. Hype the crowd, they're never tame. Mets post-game show brings the flame.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the New York Mets post-game show here with your boy CP. As always, we are here bringing the latest action, instant recaps, and analysis. Today, we're talking about Mets vs. Twins, the series finale, and unfortunately, the New York Mets, I guess, back game streak that comes to an end with 2 straight losses to lose this series. I am here instead of my usual co-host Rob, who could not make it. I am here with Nick from Nick on Nicks. Make sure to subscribe over to that YouTube channel as well. The link's going to be in my description down below as it is streaming to YouTube right now. How you doing, Nick?
Doing well. Would be a little bit better if, we were able to pull that out, or if, maybe a first base ump was able to make a simple call and not give them an extra run,
Right. Yeah, that was pretty unfortunate. We'll get into that here in just a second. We'll get into everything that you need to know about really this series, but more importantly, this game, as this was the rubber match after the Mets and Twins split the first 2 games. As always, hit those thumbs up buttons on this stream, on this post game. If you are new to the channel, if you're listening over on X, come over to YouTube and subscribe to both of our channels as well for more Mets pregame and postgame coverage, as well as everything else in between that you need to know during this 2025 season. And as always, please do drop those live chat comments. I mean, where do we start? I feel like we need to start with the actual bullpen game that commenced for the New York Mets, because it wasn't it wasn't such a bad game, really, from the pitching side of things. And I have a little bit of this box score up here. We start off with Huascar Brazaban, who provided a scoreless inning as the opener for the New York Mets with a strikeout and a walk. He actually did start the top of the second inning, or the bottom of the second inning, actually, and he was unable to get an out and record an out, and that's when Justin Hagenman came into the ball game. And by the way, Justin Hagenman, I mean, MLB debut today. He's 28 years old. He had a hell of a performance. I was thoroughly impressed. I don't think that he's going to be a mainstay contributor on this team, but he had a lot of pitches working for him. He actually pitched to a lot of contact as well, and he was just going to work. And I think that the New York Mets, especially given the circumstance of Griffin Canning being ill, and just needing, some bulk innings right in between the relievers, being Brazaban and Jose Buto, to get at least 3+ innings of work out of Justin Hagenman. He wasn't really doing too hot in AAA, and he comes in, major league debut, no problem. What'd you think of that performance, Nick?
I look frozen, but I'm not sure if you can hear me. But I will say that Hagelman, I mean, he came in, Hagenman, we had the family out there. You could see them going through all of the emotions, which was really cool. And he came in and he was absolutely, a breath of fresh air. That is one of the biggest bright spots from this game. Obviously not somebody that you expect to factor in this season or to the long-term plans, but overall, we have to like what we saw from him. Brazaban continues to impress. And, as far as a bullpen game is concerned, you're going to need different guys to come in and step up. And really, Budo was kind of the one that let go of the rope, but I loved what I saw out of Hagenman.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. 3 1/3 innings. I mean, he had the sinking fastball inducing some weak contact as well. He did give up an earned run, and that was largely due to him leaving some traffic on the bases in the middle stages of the ball game. And then Jose Buto coming in and not really being able to strand those runners. But again, even the strikeouts were kind of rolling for Justin Hagenman, especially in his first inning, with those 2 strikeouts. Had 4 strikeouts on the day total, and most importantly, no walks out of him in his MLB debut. And so I was just thoroughly impressed. Again, I said it in the pregame stream. If you missed the pregame stream, there's pros and cons to, bullpen games and having openers. I think Huascar Brazaban did a fine job. He handed it off, and that's all you can really ask for out of Justin Hagenman in terms of coming in and eating up some of those innings. And, the Mets ended up getting into some trouble thereafter with Jose Butto on the mound. We know that, but I really was impressed, and that was another gem of a find. I mean, we only have one game sample size to work off of, but this is a guy that, was signed to a split contract by David Stearns this past offseason. No one really batted an eye. And so far, if Hagenman does not come up again to the major leagues, and this was his only contribution, I think you can really still consider that a win of a signing when literally nobody knew who he was, coming into this Mets organization, coming over from the Boston organization, and being 28 years old, not really having any previous Major League Baseball experience. So you see the rest of the pitching line. We'll get into it a little bit, I guess, as we have Jose Butto pitching 1 2/3 innings with a couple earned runs. Ryan Stanek producing a scoreless inning. AJ Minter as well, and Edwin Diaz a little bit fortunate in that 9th inning that Harrison Bader came off the bag and Lindor had the tag left on him, as a true veteran middle infielder should in today's day and age of baseball, right? Especially with guys sliding head first, as you heard Keith just calling it a stupid decision, for lack of a better term, by Harrison Bader in that situation. But, I really do think that, of course, we can definitely revisit that missed call at first base after the New York Mets had already lost their challenge, which resulted in essentially a free run for the Minnesota Twins after a blown call from Hunter Windelstadt at first base. And as we all know, unfortunately, he did get injured in the next half inning. Tyrone Taylor smoked the baseball that actually hit him in the side of the head. And I guess the umpiring crew was down to 3 umpires instead of, the 4. I think he's okay, which is the good news. But let's talk about the Mets offense, Nick, for a second, because first of all, before we talk about the Mets offense, can we at least just be happy that we don't have to see any more of Harrison Bader? What a series that guy had against the New York Mets. I mean, just ridiculous. Annoying, really.
Much credit as we always give Stearns, and there's plenty of examples of him, pushing the right buttons, making the right moves. We have to say that, especially when you look at our current situation, maybe bringing Harrison Bader back might have been a decent move. I mean, he's looked great to start this season, not just against the Mets. Obviously had an otherworldly series against the Mets. He, that catch that he makes in the 8th when we're making our comeback and are looking to take the lead. And yeah, the offense in general has definitely made you a little bit, I don't know, nervous about the long-term prognosis of this team, because the pitching, especially the relief pitching, has been fantastic. We have had some timely hitting. We have shown the ability to come back late in games, but overall, the offense has been middle of the road at best. I think that we were like top 10 in runs scored. They mentioned on the telecast yesterday, which blew me away. I thought we would be much, much lower than that. But I think that right now we have a couple different issues. I did like Tyrone Taylor. He was definitely hitting the ball hard every single time he was up today. And had a couple Adam balls and a couple balls that guys got chased down in the on the warning track. So really, the conversation begins and ends with the back end of our lineup, which hopefully will be getting a little bit of help in the names of Jeff McNeil and also Alvarez coming back. But Juan Soto, I mean, he makes the comment that he made yesterday about, having the protection, which is an odd comment considering Pete Alonso is probably the best hitter in baseball thus far this year. And then, he gets the 2 straight games with home runs. You feel like he's getting out of it. And then today he has a very, very tough day at the plate. 3 strikeouts. He grounds into a double play. I thought right then, I felt like the prospects of us winning this game immediately dove off a cliff when he grounds into a 4 unassisted double play. And yeah, we need him to not just be a good hitter who gets on base. We need him to be a superstar. I have every confidence that he will be. He has done it every year since he's been in the bigs, but this is not the time to have a down year, not for the Mets, not for him personally and his overall perception.
Yeah, I completely agree with you in terms of the performance of Juan Soto today. I think that pretty much everybody watching this game, looked at these Juan Soto at bats, and it's just like, this is really not the Juan Soto that we thought we were getting. And again, it's still very early, but you come up in just a crucial situation at that point in the ball game, and you know, eh, it's it I don't even know what to say. I mean, you have an opportunity to break the door open in the game, at that point, and I believe the situation was it was bases loaded at that point because, Tyrone
Mhm.
Taylor had let off the inning with a hit. Beatty followed that up with a hit of his own. Lindor gets hit by a pitch, and we're talking about a nothing to nothing ball game at that point, and you're able to chase the starting pitcher out of the ball game, and, their starter Festa was pretty damn good, to be honest with you. I mean, he's still young. I believe this is his second season in the majors. He had a really impressive first game against Detroit, as they were saying on the broadcast, but they were able to chase him out of the ball game after only 4 2/3 innings pitched, and especially after a very unfortunate. Listen, the Mets got robbed, and Brandon Nimmo got robbed in the first inning. Thanks to a great play by Harrison Bader in left field, throwing out Jesse Winker, who just missed home plate and touching the very top of home plate by, I think, maybe 2 centimeters, if that. Like, it was that close. If his finger was like another centimeter long, maybe even another 3 millimeters, that's 1-0 right there in the first
Do
inning.
you
Thanks
agree
to
with him
Brandon Nimmo.
going right there though?
I do. I do. I like that a lot, actually. I like that a lot. And I don't even think, honestly, I don't know if that was a send by the third base coach. I'd have to watch the replay as much as it was Jesse Winker trying to be aggressive. I don't mind it because you know what? Against the Minnesota Twins, that should not be the difference, which it could you could look at couple differences in this ball game, right? Small differences. The play with Jose Buto, missed call at first base, should have been out, was saved. Buto's arguing, third base runner comes around to score. That first inning play right there by literal millimeters that Jesse Winker misses home plate and the catcher reapplies the tag. Those should not be differences between the Mets and the Twins, especially with how many opportunities that this offense consistently gets going. To be honest, personally, I don't mind Jesse Winker going in that scenario. I'm sure you disagree though, by the looks of it.
I think that, we talk about all these little things that shouldn't be the difference between us and the Twins, but when you watch baseball, typically games and even seasons come down to a bunch of little things. And at the end of the day, in that scenario right there, I think you keep him there at second base. I'm sorry, at third base. And, we just try to build a big inning. I did not think that was the time, especially against Bader's arm, which we know is strong. The ball was hit hard. I just didn't think it was the right time. I mean, I was surprised when he was going, and then when they switched the angle from the fielder to the ball in flight and the man on third, I immediately thought he's gunned. Like, he's going to be out. I'm surprised it ended up being as close as it did, just because that initial tag was missed. I did not think
Right.
that was the right decision at that juncture in the game.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a game where you hear the cliche saying all the time that baseball is a game of inches and maybe even less than that. And on multiple occasions, that proved to be the case today. And it's just frustrating because I was on the pregame earlier today. If you missed it around 11:30 a.m., I did a stream. I talked about the first 15 to 20 minutes of that stream was dedicated to the loss 3-6 yesterday in Game 2, and I don't think I can recall a single Mets loss really this season where I felt like the Mets truly got outplayed. I mean, maybe one of the 7 losses is like, all right, I'm just forgetting. But for the most part, I can say with confidence, definitely 6 of those 7 losses, I felt like at some point in the game, the Mets had a really golden opportunity to take that ball game, and they just let things slide. And that's what's been, even though the Mets are 11-7 or acting like they're 7-11, conversely, which they're not, it's hard because they've been playing not at their best. I think that we can all agree, especially offensively, for the better part of 7 innings leading up to the top of the 8th inning today. They just were not producing really good at bats. They missed the opportunity in the first inning with that Harrison Bader play to get Jesse Winker out at home. And even despite all of that, they're 11-7. Now, of course, that excuse is going to run out and that's going to get tiring eventually. I understand that 100%. But it just like when the Mets lose and when the Mets have lost, it's like they're beating themselves. They're not taking advantage of opportunities. I mean, we're talking about a team that is really struggling with runners in scoring position as an offense in total. Another game where they go 3 of 12 with runners in scoring position. I'm not sure what their runners in scoring position metric was from yesterday, but I can assume it's not good. They're getting these opportunities as an offense. They're getting the traffic on the bases, and they're just really not taking advantage. Now, there are a couple baseballs that you can look at in this game, especially with that Tyrone Taylor hit in the 8th inning that could have definitely put the Mets ahead at that point 4-3. And if it wasn't for, again, ex-Met Harrison Bader making the diving stop there in left field to get the final out of that inning, you can take a look at a handful of baseballs that have been smoked in these losses and just have found gloves. I think Vientos has had some. I think even Nimmo, with as bad as he's looked, has had some in the early goings of this season. But let's transfer the conversation. I want to get back to Juan Soto real quick, and I'll just put up this box score yet again so people at home can get a feel for how the Mets offense produced. I mean, really, let's just take a look at Pete Alonso and what he's doing so far this season. He has been one of the best hitters, maybe top 2. You can argue number 1 in baseball right now with the overall metrics, and he just looks locked in. The amount of multi-hit games I've already lost track in the early goings of 2025 that he has. He gets the Mets offense going when they were struggling down 3-0. He gets the first RBI for the Mets of the game and really starts that rally in the later stages of the ball game. He walks. It just seems like he's clicking on all cylinders, a different approach, not only the extra base hits, the home runs, etc., and which he's producing, but also the walks and his ability to get on base. I mean, he's got over a 450 on base percentage. I think it's actually over 460, which is just absolutely crazy, even through the first 17 games of this season. But conversely, I do want to give a shout out to Jesse Winker as well with a multi-hit game after an offer out of Marte in the cleanup spot yesterday. But Brandon Nimmo, who's been a very big conversation of a lot of these streams that Rob and I have done. A lot of Mets fans, especially in our live chat, are talking about Brandon Nimmo and just this approach that he's taking at the plate. And a prime example, there's been a lot of examples of this out of Brandon Nimmo, but the prime example in this ball game was the last at bat that he took in extra innings with a runner on third base, 2 outs, swinging first pitch and popping it up to end the inning in foul territory right to the third baseman. What are you seeing out of Brandon Nimmo? What do you make of the difference in approach from Brandon Nimmo, which seems like it's been taking form pretty consistently while he has been out of the leadoff spot for the better part of now a season and maybe a season and a half at this point, ever since Lindor went into that leadoff spot? What do you make of this new version? I think this is a new version of Brandon Nimmo. Increased power because he's on pace for 25 plus home runs, which is awesome, but not really much else. Like there's a lot of trade-offs that you have with Brandon Nimmo, who's, in year 3 now of a long-term deal.
So the story of Brandon Nimmo, if you've watched him his entire career, there's really 2 parts to it. The first part has been consistent. We've seen it over and over and over again. Just wildly streaky and hot and cold. It's always been who he is. He has these times where he looks like he has no idea up there, and he has other times where you seem like you can't get the guy out. The one thing that has changed is he used to be a guy who had such a discerning eye that it was almost too much of a mindset where he was looking to walk and he was looking to find his way on base. And when you're a leadoff hitter, that's a little bit more acceptable. But even then, sometimes it was too much in, that mindset as opposed to being up there and looking to do damage. Now we see a new version where he is up there and being much more aggressive. When he first started doing that last season, it was to good results. And we saw a Brandon Nimmo that looked like he was much more dangerous up there, that could drive in some runs and wasn't just going to be a table setter who didn't steal bases. So now we see the more aggressive version. And as we've seen over and over again in baseball, is that once the book gets out on you, the pitchers make an adjustment. It's about whether or not you can then counter that adjustment. What I think I see is they know that he's being more aggressive and they are not trying to get ahead. And therefore, he is sometimes popping up a pitch, popping up the first pitch when it maybe is something that, he needs to look at and, get a little bit more calibrated and look to do some damage later on in the count. It's hard, man, with him. It's hard with him because we see this up and down throughout his entire career. And when guys around him aren't performing as well, it really puts the microscope on him and you really see the downs a lot more than the ups. I do like what I've seen as far as his power. Early on, he jumps out to 4 home runs and I kind of feel like, all right, Nimmo might be a real threat in the 4 or the 5 spot. I know you and I have talked about this before, but I still feel like I would like to see a slightly more traditional lineup with my guy Pete in the 4 spot. Now, right now, can you change where Pete is with what he's doing? It would be almost absurd to even think about doing something like that. I talked to you in spring training, and I said to you, I'm telling you, this guy's approach is different. If he can cut down on swinging at that low and away breaking ball, and he can not get himself in counts where he is having to react, but he can look for a pitch, he's going to have a monster year. So far, that's been the case. I have faith that Nimmo will at some point get hot again. And I have faith that he will at some point get cold again and then get hot again. That's what he does, man. That's who he's always been.
Yeah. And so that's perfectly said from the way that I assess things as well with the inconsistencies of this lineup in its totality. I mean, pretty much everybody outside of Pete Alonso is having a little bit of an up and down season, some more so than others, right? But pretty much it's been Pete Alonso carrying the offense through the first 17 games. And based off of that, I was kind of looking at the lineup that Carlos Mendoza was throwing out there, and I was assessing it before the game actually started. And I was just like, I don't like the lineup the way that it was constructed on paper. But then you have to take a look at the production that Carlos Mendoza is looking at from everybody really past 1, 2, 3. And even Soto and Lindor kind of like up and down, up and down. As I just mentioned, Pete Alonso is really the only consistent one in this lineup. It helps that Terrence has had a little bit of a steady hand. Luis Angel Acuna now has a hit streak, and he's sort of figuring it out over the last 6 or 7 games. But really, outside of that, there's not much else for Carlos Mendoza. There's not many other options that Carlos Mendoza can actually work with. So, but on the flip side, you're right. Like reconfiguring the lineup to what I would have started the season off with, right? I've always said Soto 3, Pete Alonso 4. You put Vientos or Nimmo in the 2 hole right behind Lindor, who continues at the leadoff spot. And I think that is a little bit more efficient. Do I think that's their problem in general? No, because really with this lineup on paper, I think this team should be scoring runs regardless. But now you're in a situation where the guys that you were counting on to supplement guys like Juan Soto and Pete Alonso aren't producing. Those names at this point are Brandon Nimmo. Even though Mark Vientos is looking a little bit better, right? You can also lump Mark Vientos into that category. But they're just simply not producing. And there's only so much damage that Pete Alonso can do. And even if Juan Soto was clicking on all cylinders, even those 2 guys back to back, they're going to be pitched around for the most part, right? It's going to be Brandon Nimmo and Mark Vientos in crucial situations. And they haven't come through as of just yet. Were you surprised? And this is why I wasn't mad at Carlos Mendoza trying to figure out, some different combinations and rolling with the lineup in which he did in this series finale. Because at the end of the day, you can say it kind of worked out. I mean, Luis Angel Acuna came through, right? Got to start at second base. He's got a hit streak. He's been awesome over the last 7 games. I think I know he struck out 3 times today, but he really came through when it mattered, especially with the stolen base as well. Didn't end up scoring off the stolen base, but whatever. He's 8 for his last 20, I think, with over 1,000 OPS or just around 1,000 OPS. Brett Beatty also has a multi-hit game. He's looked absolutely abysmal, but his
Your
first
favorite player.
multi-hit game of the season, right? Well, we'll see if he can follow it up, because again, it's about if he can just take this multi-hit game and continue on with it. Although the Mets do have a decision coming up with Jeff McNeil coming back, so we'll see what they actually do there. But right. Were you surprised to see Mark Vientos? And they said on the broadcast, it was more so of giving Vientos a breather, because they're going to have to incorporate, right, these off days mixed in between for guys that are the mainstays. I mean, up until that point, Vientos has played pretty much every single game. Juan Soto, same thing. Pete Alonso, same thing. Francisco Lindor, outside of 1 game, right? Same thing. And so the mainstay guys are going to be playing every day. You have to have these scheduled off days for those mainstay position players. The catching spot with Luis Torrens is a little bit of a different situation. It's a more demanding position in general. But I'm talking about first base and outfield positions and maybe, your infield spots. There's going to be guys that need off days, especially when the Mets are playing how many games in a row at this point, right? They started the road trip with the A's series. That's 6 games in a row at this point between the A's and the Twins. They come back for 4 against the Cardinals. That's 10 straight games. And I think the Phillies are after that for 3 games. So it's 13 straight games and then an off day, right? Until your next off day. So it's a really tough job for Carlos Mendoza to go about making these lineups on an everyday basis. But not only that, with the few off days mixed in between, also with the combination of lineups when a lot of these guys that are supposed to be hitting just simply aren't hitting. So I don't know, man. What did you think about that? Vientos getting the day off today.
So I was a little bit surprised with that, but then I also think some of that might be, not even worrying about him physically, but just thinking about him mentally. He hasn't got off to the starter that he wanted. He's been hitting a lot of balls hard here recently, but he hasn't been getting the results. So I can definitely see Mendoza just looking at this as a day to be able to kind of just get him a reset, and hopefully he comes out, just red hot in the homestand. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting questions that are going to come here in these next couple weeks with how they mix up Torrens and Alvarez, because, Torrens obviously is a fantastic defender. He's got a great arm. He blocks the plate better than Alvarez, and he's been hitting for average as well. Alvarez gets you some pop, which the back end of our lineup definitely needs. But then when it comes to McNeil, and this is a question that I have for you, what do you think that they do when McNeil comes back? I mean, the obvious decision right now would be to say, okay, Beatty goes down and we bring up McNeil, right? But then now we have Jose Siri is going to miss significant time. Tyrone Taylor, for the first time today, looked like he had an idea up there at the plate. His hitting has not been very good thus far. So then if we have basically an offensive hole in center field, Jeff McNeil, we know he can play both corner outfield spots, but he can't play center. I don't think anybody, really knows when it comes to Marte what he and his availability is and what his ability is to play on like consecutive days and things like that. So what do you think that we end up doing, once everybody starts to get healthy? And is it something where maybe we have to go look for an option outside of the organization, maybe closer to the trade deadline, to get a little bit of pop and, a legitimate outfielder out there in center?
Yeah, Marte is not an option defensively. I don't think they view him as an option defensively. I think that the idea has been floated around of potentially trying Brandon Nimmo back in center field. I think that's long gone. I don't think that you should be even considering that at all if you're the New York Mets. I think Nimmo's center field days are over with. And honestly, assessing the situation, I know we're talking about the trade deadline. It's very plausible, right? Even though it's so far out, that the Mets are going to definitely be looking for some outfield help as well, especially, with a bat that can play center field, whoever that may be. There's a couple of names that come to mind, but I won't just throw them out just yet. I'd have to actually look at what they're producing so far in 2025, and things are going to change. Answers are going to change. I was not under the impression that the Mets would be ready to give. And it's actually funny you say that because, I know that Jeff McNeil is not going to get any playing time anywhere in center field, but he's actually playing center field, I think, today in his rehab assignment. For what reason, I have no idea, but I thought that was actually funny that they're giving the start in center field. But no, that's not a joke, by the way. I mean, he's
No, I know,
actually
but
playing
I can't. That's part of why I asked the question, because I heard them say that on the telecast. I'm like, there's no way he's playing any center field in the majors. No
No.
way. I would think Acuna would have a better chance of playing in the outfield or playing center field than him.
Yeah, no, he's not playing any games in center field at the major league level. And I was really skeptical that Luis Angel Acuna would be an option, especially for a defensive-minded David Stearns-led team, right? In center field. You saw him play an increase workload of games in center field at the minor league level last season. I guess perhaps to prepare for this situation, in 2025. It's not like you are banking on the situation to happen, but just in the off event that you needed him in an emergency situation for a stretch of games in center field, he'd be ready and have that experience. I was skeptical about that when Jose Siri went down, but now I'm kind of looking at it. I'm like, you know what? Especially given him stepping up to the plate, literally and figuratively now, with the way that he's looked over the last handful of games, if he could continue that, and if Brett Baty is truly the one to be going down, you're right. Tyrone Taylor has looked very lost at the plate. He almost put a baseball out today, actually, which would have been awesome and very key for the Mets, but Byron Buxton was able to catch it in the warning track in left center field. He also did smoke a baseball again. That should have been an RBI there in the 8th inning that we got robbed again. But he's not meant to be an everyday outfielder. I say that all the time. I even said it last season when he was brought in. He did a very good job filling in for Harrison Bader on a pretty much everyday basis down the stretch of 2024. But he was not traded for by David Stearns to come into this organization and be an everyday center fielder. He just wasn't. And I make the comparison to Mark Canha all the time. Mark Canha, great player for the 2022 New York Mets, right? Was put into a role that just simply wasn't for him in being an everyday starting outfielder, which is not what that role that Mark Canha was brought in for was supposed to be. And same thing goes for Tyrone Taylor. He's a 4th outfielder, platoon, defensive-minded, speed on the base paths in later innings. That's what he got brought in for, not to be an everyday center fielder. So that's where I think that maybe in the beginning of the season, the Mets can take a calculated risk. Even though you're going to have defensive miscues by Luis Angel Acuna, it's going to happen, right? If you put an infielder to go play the outfield, it's a brand new ball game for them at that point. Tracking baseballs is hard. Getting reads for, line drives. The first infielder is to go in. If you come in on a line drive, smoke directly at you, that's going over your head 100%, unless you make a just 180, backwards and jump up in the air and catch out of the air. I know that firsthand because it's happened to me plenty of times as I was playing the outfield as an infielder. I know. But to keep the offense and to keep the consistency of his at-bats while he's rolling, the Mets just might actually have to rely on him in center field and just hope for the best defensively. So right now with Jose Siri on the shelf, with it being a little bit too early to make any rash trades, right, before the trade deadline, we saw the Mets make a pretty early move last season, and it was for pitching at that point with, I'm forgetting his name now, who came over from the Rays. It was a reliever, that soft tosser. Forgetting his name.
Yeah.
Why was that? Why am I Maton, Phil Maton. It was an early
Maton,
trade
yes.
sometime in May to get Phil Maton. I'm sure the Mets can do something like that again for an outfielder, but we're still talking about realistically a month away when teams get a full assessment of what direction their 2025 is going in. So you're going to have to bridge that gap somehow. It's going to be very tough. And I think that Luis Angel Acuna right now, even though I wish it wasn't the answer, to keep his bat in this lineup and to keep him in this organization and not have him being sent down or just relegated to a spot start type of player, right? I think that Luis Angel Acuna could be that platoon center fielder for the Mets. That's how I assess it.
I totally agree. I think that if you look at the different options, he's the one that makes the most sense. Clearly, we got to see whether or not he can do it. And, he's going to have to kind of learn at the major league level, which is not an easy thing to do. But you look at his overall speed, his athleticism, and he just seems like one of those guys that has like just those baseball intangibles, where it's just like, just throw him out there and he'll figure it out. Clearly, he's got pretty good genetics when it comes to being a baseball player. So I think that that's probably the best option at this point. And that's a little bit scary. And I definitely want to keep him in the lineup as far as that speed element that he brings. And he's a wizard in the field when it comes to playing second. He's been excellent, I think. And I think that will only continue to grow. I would love to have him stay at second just so he can play second base every single day and really turn into a rock solid second baseman. But it doesn't seem like that's going to end up being the case, but it will give Carlos Mendoza a lot of options as well. He's the only other person on the roster who can play shortstop if, Lindor ever had to miss a day for some reason. And so now you have the option of being able to play him at basically any infield position other than first and also play out in center field. And then if we have, Tyrone Taylor coming in getting spot starts, I just like that versatility and what that gives Mendy as far as the different, levers that he can pull throughout the season. And at this point, man, we need something to kind of get this offense jump started. And as much as I like, Pete in the 3-hole and the production that he's given, moving a guy this time of the, when he's this red hot is not something easy to do, but especially with either throwing Nimmo or, like you said, throwing Vientos into that 2-hole just to get one of them started and maybe get this offense started, maybe getting Soto out of the 2-hole where he's clearly not having a great time so far. I think of at the end of the day, like, before this kind of gets away from us, we're 11-7 right now. There's going to be streaks, man. All of a sudden you look up and you're 11-10 and, Soto is continuing to scuffle at the plate and things start to get a little bit tight at that point. Mendy, one thing he showed last year is he is not scared to mix things up a little bit. I think right now might be the time.
Yeah, I think that earlier in the season is a lot better of a time than midseason. I think that's for sure. I think that, especially given the Mets' strong start, given the struggles, I think that Mendoza has a lot more options to play with conversely than if this team was flip it around 7-11 and still trying to figure things out. So I think that, the pitching holding up their end of the bargain for the most part, right? While the offense really hasn't, has put this team in a really good situation to sort of weather the storm where, coming into the season, that's the one area of concern where every Mets fan was just like, wow, this pitching is really going to, it could mess things up, especially as this team offensively tries to get a little bit healthier and wait until that mid-April, early May timeframe. But it's just been the complete opposite, really, outside of a couple of bad starts by certain Mets starters and really an elite bullpen at this point. The pitching has held their end of the bargain and the offense is searching for a lot of the answers. So, frustrating couple of losses. The first time in this very early season that the Mets have lost 2 games in a row. They were looking to avoid that, I guess, specific streak from commencing. But you know what? The beautiful thing about baseball, no off days in between. It's a blessing and a curse, but you get to do it again tomorrow. And a new fresh series at home starts tomorrow. Thursday, April 17th. It's a 4-game set kicking off between the Mets and the St. Louis Cardinals. Again, I think that just to round things out with this game, the Mets offense was very lackadaisical for the better half of the ball game, probably from the second inning all the way until the 8th. But when you get into, especially the 9th inning, right? You're going against Duran. You saw him the night before. He's throwing like 100 plus with a nice splitter and an off-speed pitch as well. Just 3 great pitches to throw right at you. And it's a tough challenge, right? And then Edwin Diaz holds it down, which was awesome in the bottom of the 9th, right? To send and to force extras. And then the top of the 10th, clearly the ghost runner, whether you like it or not, that's going to be a mainstay in MLB for quite some time, right? Pete Alonso draws the walk. You've got first and second, nobody out. Pete Alonso screams to the dugout, "Let's go, boys." Like, you heard that through the TV. I heard it through the TV. He's trying to rile his guys up. He's like, listen, I've been carrying this offense. Somebody get it done. Like, let this be the storyline in the New York Post, right? In the back pages tomorrow, that somebody other than me has been getting the job done, right? And just the luck of the draw. Jesse Winker smokes a baseball right at the second
Smokes.
baseman for a double play. I mean, he smokes it, really. Like, we talk about this all the time, right? Hard contact usually leads to successful production. Not all the time, because this is baseball and you can be perfect and still get out on a handful of occasions, right? But that's a baseball that in a foot or two a different direction is a base hit for an RBI, scoring Soto from second. Instead, you're talking about a situation at that point, which is a double play, runner on third base with 2 outs, and then Brandon Nimmo coming up and doing what he does, swinging first pitch and making that third out. So it's frustrating. A lot of hard hit baseballs that didn't find the green for the New York Mets. And that was all the difference in the ball game, in addition to a couple of other things. Missed call at first base. Great plays by Harrison Bader. 2 great plays to basically steal 2 runs from the New York Mets offense, and the Mets lose the series. So again, tomorrow's probable starters: David Peterson versus Andre Palante. Palante was able to actually hold the Phillies offense scoreless for 7 innings, and he's coming off of a very impressive performance against that Phillies team. So that's something that I'm very curious about, how the Mets offense comes out of the gates swinging in their own ballpark against a pretty good pitcher that has, I think, a 2.10 ERA in Andre Palante. David Peterson is getting the ball for the New York Mets. We have to see, and I'm sure we'll talk about it tomorrow during our streams, but I think that the notion right now is that if Griffin Canning can't start on Friday, the Mets might actually have to roll with another opener, or perhaps call up another pitcher if they decide to go that route. And they're talking about Brandon Sproat. There's been murmurs, there's been whispers, but there's nothing concrete as of just yet. That would be exciting at home on a Friday night to have one of your big prospects coming up and making that start in front of the home crowd. But Nick, final thoughts here, about this game, about this series, and the look ahead into the Cardinals series before we round things out here on the post-game show.
So when you look at the Mets, thus far, you have to say that the one thing that we thought was, the pitching was going to be a little bit shaky, and obviously it has overperformed. I do have faith that the offense will get it going, but we've seen it. We saw it last season in the beginning of our season versus June through the rest of the season, where we were the best team in baseball. It all comes down to whether or not you hit in the clutch. Runners in scoring position, how you perform there, it is maybe the most telling sign on whether or not you have a good offense and, subsequently a good baseball team. So we have to realize that the pitching is not going to be, I don't think all of these guys, all these relievers that are having these just outstanding years are going to just have the best years of their career for the rest of the season. So there's going to be some ebb and flow with that. Can the offense get going and carry us when that fall off? It's going to come. It's going to come. Juan Soto, you got to get it done. I wanted to ask you, what did you think about the comments that he made? The comment that he made about, the best hitter in baseball, having Aaron Judge behind him. What did you think about that comment?
There is statistical, I guess, explanations to it, right? I think a couple of reporters were saying stuff about him getting pitches in the zone. I think Will Salmon put out a tweet about it. I don't know, so the thing about it is that the media was trying to drive it as a Pete Alonso, from the way that I saw things, as a Pete Alonso versus Aaron Judge thing. Objectively, Pete Alonso has been one of the better hitters in baseball this season, but so has Aaron Judge. And the sample size and the body of work between the two players, let's be honest, Aaron Judge is the better player, and he's been the more consistent player in his career. I know that Mets fans, it's a hard thing to actually admit that, but it's the case. I don't think Juan Soto meant any ill will out of what he said in his comments. I don't think that what the media made it out to be, right? Maybe the words and the way that he worded it wasn't necessarily how he wanted it to come across. I don't think that he was trying to diss Pete Alonso in any way. I think it was more so giving flowers to Aaron Judge and producing a career season right before Aaron Judge in the lineup. I didn't really have any problem with it. And the fact that, personally speaking, if a guy like, I think, Sal Licata from, the fan is trying to tell me that this should infuriate Mets fans, then I'm definitely not going to be infuriated because I don't really listen to what that guy has to say, to be honest.
Hey, Salicata, I mean, he's hyperbolic as anybody else, and he's always looking for. You could tell when a guy's trying to get clips as opposed to actually, like, give his thoughts and his feelings on something. But I actually agree with him on this. I think that first and foremost, yes, Aaron Judge is a better hitter overall than Pete Alonso. I would argue that Pete Alonso thus far is having a better season than him, but it's not like Aaron Judge is, just having a bad year. Like, he's still Aaron Judge, and he's consistently been that. And especially there was a time where I would say, hey, you got to talk about Pete Alonso in that same conversation. Last season before that, Aaron Judge, he, destroyed that conversation. Fair. All that being said, Juan Soto, you're in New York now for the second year. You've been a big time player for your entire career. At this point, I need Juan Soto to be a little bit smarter and a little bit better with how he delivers his comments to the media. I just think that that's a comment that you just don't even make when you have a guy like Pete Alonso and what he means to this Mets organization, and especially what he is having as far as, the fact that Alonso is having this type of year. You have to be a little bit smarter, and you have to avoid that comment, or at least throw a disclaimer on the back end of it and say, but hey, I got Pete behind me this year, and he's been fantastic. He's been, the best hitter on this team. So I have the protection, and just put it back on yourself. I just don't like putting that on anything other than yourself. I don't like saying anything that can be misconstrued or viewed as an excuse. And I definitely don't like not going out of your way to make sure that you still give some props to Pete Alonso. I just didn't think it's very easy to avoid this ever being a headline if you're Juan Soto. That's my point. I'm not even saying that what he said isn't true. I'm just saying that I hope that, maybe a guy like Lindor, or maybe somebody, within the organization has a conversation with him and explains to him, like, hey, bud, like, we could deal with this just slightly differently, and we never have to talk about things like this. The New York media is going to try to get you to make statements like this. Be a little bit more on guard, and don't make that mistake. As far as this next series.
Oh no, I was just gonna say they definitely baited him. I mean, that was definitely a bait kind of question for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to just, for your homie, for your guy who's your teammate, and hopefully, he can get a deal done and he's your teammate for years to come. And the guy who has been doing a great job of being protection for you behind you. I mean, look, we go into extra innings, and pitchers are basically intentionally walking this guy. They don't want any part of him, and they are doing that. There's situations where you're getting intentionally walked in front of him, and he's then delivering. So I just don't understand how you don't in that moment realize, like, but I got to say something nice about Pete here too. Just on the back end, just add a little disclaimer on the back end, Juan, and we're good to go. I hopefully he learns from it, but it's not a huge deal. I don't think it's bothering Pete, and he still continues to rip the cover off the ball even after the comments, both yesterday and today. So we it's not something to worry about. I just hope he learns from it. As far as this next, this next series and this homestand in general, what you want to see is you want to see this team start to get some big hits with runners in scoring position. You want to see them continue to play clean in the field. I mean, some of, like, that one loss that we had where Lindor makes the two errors. Like you said, there hasn't been a tough bunch of games where we've been outplayed. There's usually a couple things you can look to and say, hey, these little things killed us today. Today, honestly, that little thing that happened to us, there were some times that we didn't step up, but I love the fact that we came back. I hate the fact that we end up losing a game where there's just a clear bad call at first base. And honestly, if you're a major league umpire, you have to make that call right 100 out of 100 times. I mean, it's just, what are we doing here? Why are you there? Why do you exist if you can't make that call? It wasn't even that close of a play. When you look at it, and I thought in real time, I was like, he's safe. I'm sorry, he's out. I said, in real time, I said he's out. And then Buto's got to be a little bit smarter, and no matter what, just throw the ball home right there and not necessarily look and wait for the call. But overall, I just think that this team, we have a lot to be optimistic about, because we all feel like the offense is going to wake up. These guys are going to play to the back of their baseball cards, and hopefully we can start to step it up. Do you feel like because I know there's a lot of chatter about this online, and I think even so in just this comment section. Do you think Eric Chavez is part of the problem?
Um, yes, yes, I think so. I said this going back to 2023. To be honest with you, I think that there's a lot of Mets fans in this fan base that don't really necessarily agree with the philosophy and the approach that he continues to make public, right? I don't think that it's a winning one in today's day and age, and I've been very adamant about that. But you can't put all like, getting rid of him at this point, is that really going to magically turn things around for the New York Mets? I don't think so. And at the end of the day, these guys are professionals at the same time, so they should be able to make the necessary adjustments as well. But do I have confidence that Eric Chavez is going to be here and a staple of this Mets organization for years to come? I don't think so. I don't think so. I've been very clear. I think that I don't like his approach and think it's outdated. But again, it's hard for me to say, is he the problem? Because we've been having the same conversation by Jeremy Hefner for like years now, right? And he's continuously just made it through multiple regimes. And you're like, why is this guy still around? And there's things that go on behind the scenes objectively that, we don't see as fans on a regular basis. And, that definitely has a hand in them keeping their jobs, right? And players could be a fan, like for example, Chili Davis. I mean, years ago, right? I think that the Mets players, from what was hearing back then, especially Pete Alonso, was just very unhappy with the letting go of Chili Davis, and it's just like you were producing under him, so that's what happens. You know what I mean? There is a scapegoat at some times, especially to send a message to the offense or any position group on the team to get things going. But all I have to work off of is what Eric Chavez has stated publicly about what the prioritized approach is. And it always seems to be Eric Chavez, right? We never really talk about Jeremy Barnes, right? Because these are our co-hitting coaches at the end of the day. So I don't really know how to assess it. I don't really think it matters as of right now. I don't think he'll be around long term, but the offense needs to get it going themselves, I think, at this point. So, and to go off of your point, before we get out of here, the runners in scoring position, the Atlanta Braves have a better batting average with runners in scoring position, and they're like what 5-13 at this point. They just lost again to the Toronto Blue Jays. That score went final before the Mets score went final, so they are ranked like 16th, I think, in the league, so around the middle of the pack. And the Mets really aren't that far off, right? They're batting 215 with runners on. The Mets are, which is ranked 18th in the MLB over the first, handful of games so far in this season. So the clutch hitting in general, all across the board, pretty much everybody not named Pete Alonso needs to get better. The clutch hitting needs to come through. And at this point, there has to be a stretch in this early season, right? Where this offense conversely is carrying this team. And maybe or maybe not, you have the pitching falling off a little bit. It's not falling off just yet, but if there is some regression, it'd be nice if both, I guess, can kind of click at the same time. Both sides of the ball can click at the same time. That'd be ideal. But this offense and watching them carry this team for a little bit of this early season would be a nice switch, I would say. So that's my take on things. And that's where the Mets stand with runners on, by the way, which is not really great. They need to be top 10. They need to be top 10 in pretty much every offensive category when rolling out lineups that have the firepower and the star power that the Mets do, especially in the top 5 or top 6. So hopefully they get it going in the Cardinals series, new series, fresh series starting tomorrow. We've got Mets baseball for at least another week straight without an off day. So be prepared. We're back at it tomorrow. Hopefully pregame and postgame schedule permitting. I know Rob is going to hold it down this weekend. I know that I will be out of town. We'll see how many streams I can get in with Rob, but at least you'll see his face. And hopefully we're talking about another series win. Get back into the win column and yeah, bounce back from this frustrating series in Minnesota. So, Nick, I appreciate you filling in for Rob in this post game. Definitely subscribe to the Nick on Knicks. Speaking of the Knicks, playoffs are starting up, so we'll see if they can take care of those Detroit Pistons. Subscribe to his YouTube channel down. It's in my description. Click on it, subscribe. Talking Knicks, talking Mets, talking Jets if you're into football as well. All that good stuff. I appreciate you all. Smash those thumbs up buttons, smash those subscribe buttons, and we'll see you all in the next stream. Peace out. Let's go Mets.